one-year-old kind of EVs now are affordable now for a lot more people than previously. There was a perception that, well, unless you've got 30 grand plus to spend, there's no point even looking at EVs. And I guess it has opened that market out to more consumers.
Yeah, definitely. As I say, we found it. All of a sudden now a £40,000 EV new, second hand at today's price is probably mid-20s, and it is far more affordable than what it was new. So we have seen a little bit of a spike on used EV recently. But as I say, you've got to treat it as two halves.
Hello and welcome to this latest edition of the AM News Show podcast. As ever, if you enjoy watching interviews with senior people in the industry and finding out the insights that they're able to share, please do hit that subscribe button and make sure that you don't miss out on future episodes. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Darren Ardron, the Managing Director of Perry's AM100 Dealer Group, and also Darren Martin, who is Director of Valuations at CAP HPI. So we're going to talk a little bit about kind of market conditions being seen at the moment, and obviously used cars been a big topic for dealers for the last kind of couple of years. So a little bit on that. So perhaps for a start with you, Derren, what are you seeing in the market out there at the moment? How are things shaping up?
It's been a strong year. It's been healthy for dealers. I think one of the key points is that demand has probably surpassed expectations since the start of the year. A bit of trepidation at the end of last year around the cost of living concerns. Were people going to be out buying cars? And they have been. So there's the first 3 months of the year values actually went up. Last couple of months they've stabilised a little bit, but overall it's a strong market, and everyone's doing okay. I think the big caveat on that is electric vehicles, which has been really well documented. Electric vehicles have struggled. It's a bit of an understatement. We've seen some drops in values in the last sort of 6 to 8 months of over 30% on certain models, but that is still a very small part of the market. So overall, the used car market is strong, with the caveat of electric vehicles.
Okay, and while EVs are the big kind of topic of now, but you go back kind of 5-10 years, and diesels were the big kind of supply of volume in the market. What are you seeing there? Is there still demand for diesel cars?
Yeah, definitely. It can be regional. There's obviously less of them in the market now, because obviously what happens in what appears in the used car market is what gets registered in the new car market. Diesel registrations have dropped considerably, but supply and demand are keeping up with each other on diesel. We've not seen too much difference between increases or decreases in petrol values and diesel values. They stay really strong. We've had a strong sort of 3 years for both fuel types. Diesel still does a good job for you if in certain circumstances. Obviously, if you're living around an ultra-low emission zone, maybe not. But if you're in more rural areas, then yeah, still really strong and good opportunities for dealers.
Still a good customer base for it.
Yeah,
Excellent.
definitely. Yeah.
You mentioned the EV issue that's been well reported recently. Darren, what sort of impact has that had on dealers? What have dealers been doing about that?
I think initially, Tim, it was quite difficult. I think there's two types of EV at the minute for me. There's the ones that you've had in stock for a while, particularly ex-demonstrators and things like that. Yes, it's been hard with those because they were purchased at the original price. They're the ones that have taken the big hit in valuation. But actually, we're seeing EVs at the minute as an opportunity because there's quite a few now coming into the market. And obviously, with the way that they've been adjusted in price, there's quite a good demand for them at the correct price. So you've almost got to treat it as two halves at the minute. Deal with the old ones and, quite frankly, take the pain. But then for us at the minute, we're definitely not being scared about buying them because there are some good opportunities.
I must admit, with my kind of consumer hat on, we've been in the market recently looking at cars, and one-year-old kind of EVs now are affordable now for a lot more people than previously. There was a perception that, well, unless you've got 30 grand plus to spend, there's no point even looking at EVs. And I guess it has opened that market out to more consumers.
Yeah, definitely. As I say, we found it. All of a sudden now a £40,000 EV new, second hand at today's price is probably mid-20s, and it is far more affordable than what it was new. So we have seen a little bit of a spike on used EV recently, but as I say, you've got to treat it as two halves.
Yeah, is educating consumers about electric vehicles still a challenge for dealers? How's the industry getting to grips with that?
I think we're getting grips to it. I still think there's a long way to go. I think there's a massive way to go in terms of the infrastructure. Yeah, we're still a long way behind on that. But I think our teams are actually grabbing hold of it quite well now. For Perry's last year, I think it was 24% of everything we sold was alternative fuel vehicles. So we're actually quite used to the concept of EV. Slightly different scenario where you've got standalone used car operations, because it's still the new kid on the block to them. But I think we're getting with it now. It's working quite well.
Okay, fantastic. Derren, we've just recently reported on some developments with CAP HPI, where you're bringing out a product kind of helping dealers more effectively with evaluations for options. Tell us a little bit about that. How's that going to help them with their used car business?
Yeah, our valuations they're generally of a base vehicle. So we do all the trims and engines and everything, but we don't do it with factory fit options, and that's what the industry has wanted from us. That's what we've always done. So we've recently produced a product that will value. So it's within our Valuation Anywhere product, and as an add-on to that, you can click on the actual options that the vehicle left the factory with. Optional extras, and they get priced accordingly, and the used as a used price. So we've done a lot of research, we've got a lot of expertise. There are obviously various nuances around that. If you get a car, as we call a Christmas tree, with 15 options on it, not all of those options will get a value. You have to have also you can't have the value of the options being more than a certain percentage of the vehicle's overall value. So all of that goes into the pot.
Okay.
So you can either have a base value of the vehicle still, or you can have the value with the option content included, and that will add on to the price of the vehicle within the product. And you can see, and then you can also get if you subscribe to our forecast product, you can see how that's going to depreciate over the next 12 months as well. So it's we're really pleased with how it looks and feels. That's phase one. Phase two, we're going to include it in our spec check product, which is a historical HPI product, where you put in the registration number of the vehicle, and it will return the options for you and price them accordingly. So that's the next phase of that. So yeah, we're really excited about it, and I think it helps dealers who traditionally would have looked at that, and some may have added options on, some may have not. It will help with pricing up part exchanges if they want to use it for that as well. Okay. And I think there'll also be interest from leasing companies who maybe will sell it as a percentage of cap, won't add the options onto that, and are missing a profit opportunity. So options are obviously a profit opportunity in the used car market, and that doesn't always get taken into account. So we'll give a price, a guide price for what we feel they're worth.
Sure. Okay. Has it been a bit of a headache doing that in a point where, with the semiconductor issue, manufacturers seem to be kind of constantly adjusting the spec and the kind of options availability for some of their models? I guess that's been a complication.
Yeah, there's been a lot of complications from the semiconductor crisis, and lots of vehicles that are going to appear in the market without certain bits on them that maybe they should have done previously. We've had manufacturers that have contacted and says we can't put a big screen on it now. What should we do instead? Should we put even things like, should we put roof rails on it and call it the same model? No, don't do things like that. Just if you can't get them, then tell us. We'll create new IDs and cater for it.
Yeah.
But it's a bit of it's a tricky area on the options, and there is obviously opinion in there. Someone may think a sat nav's worth more than someone else may think it's worth. So we'll provide a guide price. But yeah, the semiconductor issue, I think, has just affected loads of areas of the industry. But also that's partly why the market is so strong as well, because we haven't had all the supply that's coming in. So those shortages have led to a really strong market, which is what went up by 30% and has not come down by anywhere near as much as that. So still really strong.
Absolutely. Because I guess Darren, historically, kind of valuing Part X's was a bit of gut feel, wasn't it? While you had the data to kind of look at, an experienced kind of industry veteran would look at it and think, well, actually, okay, it's got the 19-inch alloys, it's in a whatever colour, and it's got leather interior, so actually I will value it a bit more than that. So this potentially is quite a good way of reinforcing that kind of gut feel.
Yeah, I think it's almost a science now. I think you're absolutely right. We could probably all go back 10 years and look at a vehicle and value it without looking at any form of guide. I think, consumers now are just so savvy when they're looking on all the websites now. They know exactly what they want. And we see it so many times where, maybe in the past we've advertised a car and we've just forgotten one little option on it. And the difference that can make to searches on it is incredible. So, I think all the tools we can get are a great help now, because it literally is a science now, valuing cars.
Absolutely. And it is used cars a large part of your focus now at Perry's, obviously, with the market
it's a huge
conditions.
part. I mean, we've had a very good start to the year on used cars, which is really good. It's a huge part of our business now. We're about to go into all sorts of changes with agency and bits and pieces coming forward. So I think used cars has to be. I think we've actually got to step it up to the next level now.
Okay, tell me more. What's your thinking behind that?
I think the big issue, Tim, is, do we really not know what agency will be? It's such an unknown at the minute. We know the concept of it. We know how it will work, but it's not really proven yet, is it? And we've all probably in the last 2 years enjoyed quite good times out of new cars, simply down to lack of supply, nothing else. But lack of supply, better margins. We've not been overstocked. The agency model is a whole new field. No negotiation anymore. So I think we've almost got to park new cars. New cars will be what it'll be under agency, and just take new cars to the next level.
Okay, because your business, you've got strong relationships with the Stellantis brands, with Ford as well. So coming down the line, then that agency change is going to be quite significant for Perry's.
It's going to be a huge change for Perry's. So we're expecting Ford to be going agency circa 2026. We know Stellantis will go agency, two parts really. They'll go agency on commercial vehicles next year, and then they'll go agency on commercial vehicles again in 2026. So, yes, two massive big changes to our group.
Mm-hmm. The thing that I find quite interesting is all the talk of agency with various OEMs. It's still very much focused on the new car business, but it's not long ago that I was talking to OEMs that was showing much more interest in the used operations, because ultimately it underpins the RVs of the new cars. But thankfully, it seems that they are kind of still leaving the dealer with the relative freedom to operate their used car business as they need to.
Yeah, that certainly seems to be the case, and I think we need to hope that, quite frankly, that is the case moving forward.
Yeah.
I think manufacturers, their area of expertise is new cars. And probably the dealers' areas of expertise is used cars. So I think it's very careful that we keep them separate.
Yeah, a couple of off-record conversation with some manufacturers recently as well showed. I think some of the brands are starting to appreciate the skill set that is at the retailer more than they perhaps have done previously. Now that they're starting to kind of explore that, they're realising the complexity that there is in selling, in retailing the car. So be interesting, and we've seen a couple of brands that have kind of pushed back their implementation of agency as well accordingly. So. But anyway, outside of agency, Darren, how was 2022 for Perry's?
2022 was a little bit more of a challenge than 2021, but I think we expected that. I think 2021 was probably the record year.
Yeah.
For all the reasons we've talked about in the past. 2022 was a little bit more of a challenge, but still a very acceptable result we expect for the group. 2023 has started off very strong. So, I'm hopeful that we'll continue that momentum throughout quarter two. It's fair to say that the new car side of things has just slowed a little bit from a forward order point of view. We've probably had the last 2 years of having these massive order banks. Yeah. We've still got a very good order bank, but it does feel like it's slowing down a little bit. But, as Derren said at the start, used cars have been strong. We've had a very strong start this year to used cars, and equally a very strong start across all of our after-sales department as well.
Okay.
Which has been good.
And with the challenge of the last couple of years, I know, speaking to some dealers, that they've had to encourage their staff to perhaps change some of the practices to those people who are waiting for that new car order to come through, kind of upping the communication with them, and kind of the skill set of kind of identifying their needs and perhaps moving them into something that's nearly new or used because they want something more quickly than waiting. Are we likely to see some of that shift back then now that some of the volume is coming through with new cars and the order bank is the waiting time is kind of coming down?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, with a lot of the brands we deal with, I think we've gone through the real pain points, particularly on cars. It's still a bit tricky on commercial vehicles. We still have some particularly long lead times on commercial vehicles, but across the car sector now, I actually think we're through that pain point now, and actually there's a little bit more free stock out there. Nothing like it ever was previously, but a little bit more free stock. So personally, I think we're through the worst of it from a supply point of view.
Okay. Are you seeing that, Darren, as well with the fleets and leasing companies that you work with? Is there more willingness to kind of to replace their current fleet and push stock out into the market?
Yeah, well, the fleet and leasing, well, they were kind of at the back of the queue, weren't they, when the semiconductor crisis hit? Then the manufacturers were trying to focus on retail. That's now changed this year. The fleets and the leasing companies are getting new cars, and they're then churning their used cars. So there's more cars appearing. Still not to the levels of 2019. We're probably halfway in between where we were last year and where we were pre-COVID with regards to volumes in the used car market. But it is, there's opportunities now for those fleet cars to come back in, and we see those selling quite well through the various channels that they go through. So, and the dealers, I think with agency, it is really important that the dealers are left to do the used car stuff, because they're experts at it, and you can see with what's happened with some of the online channels that they haven't fared quite so well, because the dealers are still firmly required. So as more cars come back in, there's still not going to be enough to affect values considerably, though. So those big increases we saw in 2021 and stable, a strong 2022, we think it's going to stay strong in 2023, just because there will be more cars coming back in, but demand is mopping that up. And I think we all kind of, when we were all thinking that this year might be difficult, we kind of forgot that used cars are a necessity purchase for people, and people will still need to buy used cars, and people want to replace their used cars. So all of that sort of thing's still going on. So yeah, looking forward to a continuation of a strong year.
I think dealers will welcome a level of stability again, given the changes in the business model that are going on. Then if we can see some stability in terms of prices and the market conditions, then that will be welcome. Just before we kind of wrap up, Darren, we talked a bit about the used car opportunity, but what other opportunities do you see ahead for Perry's, and kind of where do you think there are gaps in the market, I guess, for a bit of kind of innovation, a bit of new direction for dealers?
I think further opportunities. I still think there's a little bit more to go on commercial vehicles. We've had 3 fantastic years on commercial vehicles, and I hope that continues, and I think we do a little bit more there. I think also on after sales, we talk an awful lot in the industry about sales, but actually, if we're not careful, after sales, it's a huge part of our business. We've got a shrinking park for obvious reasons. We've got older cars now out there, and I think there's huge opportunities on the older cars from an after sales point of view. So, we're spending an awful lot of focus at this moment in time on, the after sales functions of the business as opposed to the sales functions.
Okay, that's interesting, because traditionally franchise dealers have been more focused on the younger car owners, aren't they? But actually, and with the cost base that franchise dealers traditionally have, then to some extent that's priced older customers with older cars out of the market.
Absolutely.
But how do you address that as a business?
You've just got to be a little bit braver, Tim. You've got to think a little bit out of the box. It's still it can be still an educational challenge for some of our managers that can't get their head around the preparation costs of a 5-year-old car, but actually there's a huge market. A 5-year-old car today is not what a 5-year-old car was 10 years ago. They're all very modern, they're all very well put together, and even some of the higher mileage ones, still very good opportunity. Plus the fact they've all gone up so much in price, that's in a lot of places where people are buying. So we've really tried to develop that side of the business in the last 12 months. And we definitely see, the dividends paid this year.
So with that, the cars that are coming in as Part X, you're keeping more of those.
Some of
them. Turning them onto the.
Yeah, some of them, not all of them. I mean, clearly some just are beyond what we'd want to sell. But I think we're not as frightened as we once were about buying cars. Maybe probably in the past as a franchise dealer, you may have been a little bit precious and don't really want anything over 50,000 miles. But actually, what's 50,000 miles now?
Yeah.
On a modern car, it's not a lot, is it? So I think we've just had to think a little bit further afield than what we once did.
Okay, fantastic, thank you. And Darren, what do you see in terms of kind of opportunity for some innovation in the market? What do you see anything that we might be seeing further ahead?
I personally think the biggest sort of opportunity and challenge is electric vehicles. They're obviously coming in abundance now. They're still a very small part of the market now, but that's only going to increase. We've seen what's happened to values over the last few months. Dealers, well, the consumer needs to fall back in love with it to a degree. They need to stop. They need to buy in bigger volumes. They are buying, but they need to buy more because the supply is coming, and the dealers need to get the confidence back into buying them. But as Darren said earlier, there are opportunities in the EV world. Prices are high on petrol and diesel cars. There aren't many bargains to be bought out there in the trade, but there are some bargains to be had with EVs. Speaking to dealers that are doing very well now on iPace, Tesla Model 3s are now starting with a 2 in the used car market. So there are opportunities there. There's still some realignment of values to come. There's still some pressure on values, but I think if dealers are prepared to sort of qualify the customers, and we can get consumers back on board with EVs, that's a big opportunity there, because a lot of those cars look really reasonable on value now.
Yeah.
We've got examples of an electric Golf worth in the used car market worth £5,000 less than a petrol and diesel equivalent. Similar on Mocha, but then you've got things like the Audi e-tron, which is £5,000 more than the equivalent Audi. So there's lots of different sort of things manoeuvring around in there. It's difficult to just talk about EVs in general, but there are some opportunities if they look at those vehicles and see some reasonably priced ones, and there's some margin to be had.
Absolutely. That just made me think. So I remember quite a few years ago when dealers were first getting involved in selling new EVs, speaking to some franchisees who were talking about the importance of kind of building that confidence with the customer. In many cases, even PHEVs, letting them take the car away for 24, 48 hours to see that it fits that lifestyle and kind of get that confidence. Now, that's more of a challenge with a used car forecourt, isn't it? But how do we kind of overcome that? Because a used car customer equally is going to need that confidence that it is going to suit their needs. Any ideas how the industry can tackle that?
Well, 50% of our service courtesy car fleet is now EV. And we did that as an intention, quite frankly, to try and get people to experience the EV cycle. Having got an EV in the family, you've absolutely got to live with one to get used to it. So we've tried things like that, Tim. We've tried putting courtesy cars on. We've tried to put as many staff as possible in EVs to give them the experience so they can then portray that experience to the customer. So it's very difficult to give somebody a test drive for 2 days on a used car, but I think you've got to try other ways around it.
Yeah, absolutely. I lived with a Cooper Born for 9 months for the first time I've had an EV for that long, and I think the consumer, the way the government is driving the market, the consumer is going to have to accept that you do need a slight change of mindset currently with EVs. You probably need a little bit more patience if you're doing lots of miles, because you do need to factor in a 25-minute stop to grab a coffee while you've stuck on an ultra rapid charge or whatever. But it's not, to me, it's not that big an ask. I think some of it is the lack of awareness, the kind of the ignorance, I guess, kind of out there amongst Joe public of what it does entail. Plus, you get the scare stories we saw since Christmas of people queuing for motorway chargers, kind of 30 cars deep, that kind of stuff. I've not experienced that. I might be lucky. Maybe there's just loads of chargers on the A1 that I've been lucky enough to kind of find the time. But I think it will happen. I think more people will. A lot of people asking questions, but people will get the confidence to adopt it, and they're going to have to. The government clearly wants people to move into EVs from 2030. New car buyers, certainly.
Yeah.
So
I think the infrastructure is a big thing at the minute. I mean, you've just said yourself, the A1, but there are certain parts of the country at the minute that it's almost desolate from a charger point of view. I think once that gets a little bit stronger, you will get that level of confidence. And, there's been some recent research done, I think, by Autotrader that 96% of buyers that buy an EV buy a second one. So actually, it's quite interesting that once people get on that journey, they're quite happy to stay on that journey.
Yeah.
At the moment, there's plenty of choice around. You could buy a petrol one or a diesel one or an EV. Going forward, there won't be so much choice.
Will there?
So you've got to get on board with EVs, but the infrastructure 100% needs to improve so that people have got the faith. I think at the moment what puts people off is you've actually got to think about it if you're going to have an EV. How is this going to affect my life? You buy a petrol car, you go and fill it up.
Yeah.
It's that sort of mind, thought process really on how is my life going to be affected by this EV, and people aren't used to that with a car.
Yeah.
It's just I'm going to get that car because it's going to do the job for me.
We want the optimum convenience, don't we?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, we're going to have to wrap up there, I'm afraid. But thank you, Darren, and thank you, Darren, for your time today.
Thanks, Tim.
And as I said, if you enjoy watching our podcast with industry executives, then please do hit that subscribe button and make sure you catch our next one. Thanks very much.